Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidi Muhammadin Taha al-Amin alayhi salatu wassalam. Today we're going to start with the muhkam verses and the mutashabih verses. There's a section that we're going to skip for now, but we're going to start with the muhkam verses and the mutashabih verses. We'll come back to what we missed, what we're missing now later. So, the author said the muhkamat and the mutashabihat verses. Now this is knowledge that pertains to the Qur'an. So knowledge of the types of verses that are in the Qur'an. And for somebody who, for example, doesn't know much about the Qur'an, for them to at least know the way it's structured, or at least the two types of verses that are in it, that's huge for a person to know that. So a person in knowing this should feel a lot of sharaf, a lot of honor, that at least we know this about the Qur'an. I remember when we were younger, we didn't know these things that pertain to the Qur'an. We just thought the Qur'an, you go and you recite the Qur'an and you come back home, and if you recite it wrong you get hit, okay, mashallah. But we didn't know this about the Qur'an, that it's got two types of verses. Most of us might have actually finished the Qur'an, reciting it whether properly or not, and had never heard of these two types of verses. Isn't that the case? You can imagine that for many people. So to understand this topic that we're going to mention, it's necessary to know that the Qur'an has within it two types of verses. You have the verses that are called al-muhkamat, so the muhkam verses, and likewise the mutashabih verses. So muhkam and mutashabih. I'm going to repeat the names again and again so it sticks, okay? Muhkam and mutashabih. If you want to say plural, you say the muhkamat, the muhkams. And the plural of the other type of verse is the mutashabihat, the mutashabihs. There are two types of verses in the Qur'an. Now, where does this come from? This does not come from the opinion of a scholar. No, this is something that was revealed by Allah within the Qur'an. Allah mentioned in Surah Al-Imran, Surah 3, Ayah 7. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala revealed, هُوَ الَّذِي أَنزَلَ عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابِ, meaning, O Muhammad, alayka salatu wassalam, it is Allah who revealed the Qur'an to you. Minhu ayatun muhkamat. Among the verses of the Qur'an, part of this Qur'an, this revealed text, there are muhkamat, there are ayatun muhkamat. Ayahs that are muhkamat, and then Allah described them. Hunna, they are ummul kitab. They are the base. They are the foundation of al-kitab, of the book, of the Qur'an. They are the base. They are the premise. They are that which is confirmed, solid. And then Allah revealed wa ukhar, and there are other verses as well. Wa ukharu mutashabihat. So you see these words, they're actually mentioned in the Qur'an. So Allah revealed ayatun muhkamat. These are one type of verse, and these ayahs are actually ummul kitab, like literally the mothers of the book, meaning the foundation. Wa ukhar, of the book, yani the Qur'an. Wa ukhar, and others, mutashabihat. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala revealed in this verse, فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ زَيْغٌ, and as for those that have deviancy in their hearts, فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ, in their hearts, they have zayg, deviancy. What do? فَيَتَّبِعُونَ مَا تَشَابَهَ مِنْهُ, they follow from the ayahs of the Qur'an the mutashabih ayahs. They take the literal meanings of one of the two types of ayahs within the Qur'an. We're going to discuss more about that. Why? Why do they do that? ibtigha al-fitnati wa ibtigha at-ta'wili. They do this with the purpose of causing fitna, of causing tribulations. By taking these ayahs literally, they cause a lot of turbulence. They cause a lot of chaos and wreckage. And they seek to misguide people. That is the ultimate chaos. And with the purpose of seeking to interpret these verses, they seek to understand these mutashabih verses according to their own misguided opinions. All of this is in the Qur'an. هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب منه آيات محكمات هن أم الكتاب وأخر متشابهات, and others are mutashabihat. فأما الذين في قلوبهم, as for the ones that have in their heart زيغ, they have deviancy in their hearts, فيتبعون, they follow ما تشابه منه, they follow the mutashabih verses. Why? ibtigha al-fitna, because they want to cause tribulations, meaning that by doing this, by taking these verses literally, that the verses that we're going to explain, they actually cause a lot of fitna. وَابْتِغَاءَ تَأْوِيلِهِ, because they understand them in a way that they want to understand them, even if it is against the intellect. Continuing, the verse says, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ. This means that no one knows the correct interpretation of these verses literally, and we're going to explain the meaning, except Allah. وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ, and those who also know the meanings of these verses are those that are well rooted in the knowledge. Like our master Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, he said, وَأَنَا مِنَ الرَّاسِخِينَ فِي الْعِلْمِ, and I am one of those that are well rooted in the knowledge of in the religious knowledge, the knowledge about the Qur'an. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam made dua. He said, Allahumma allimhu at-ta'wil al-kitab. Oh Allah, grant my first cousin Ibn Abbas, grant Abdullah the knowledge of understanding the Qur'an. And surely this dua was answered. This dua was answered, and he was granted that. So this part of the verse, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ, this is a very important part of the verse. And we're going to give details about this. وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ يَقُولُونَ آمَنَّا بِهِ, those who are well rooted in the knowledge, they say, we believe in the Qur'an. كُلٌّ مِّنْ عِنْدِ رَبِّنَا, that all of the Qur'an, whether the verses are muhkam or mutashabih, which we're going to go on to explain what they are exactly, all of them, they were revealed by Allah. وَمَا يَذَّكَّرُ إِلَّا أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ, and no one understands the reminders except for those of sound minds. So let us speak about the muhkam verses, about whom Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala said they are the foundations of the book of the Qur'an. The muhkam verse is that which according to the Arabic language can only bear one meaning. So there is a verse, it contains words. It might contain 5 words, 6 words. Like, for example, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillah Rabb al Alameen. And there's also a lam, so you could say 5 words with particles and such on. So these 5 words, for example, or other verses, you look, do they have these words in these verses? Do they have other meanings in the Arabic language? If the answer is no, that they only have one meaning, then this verse altogether, it will only have one meaning. It won't have another meaning. There won't be a potential second meaning or third possible meaning, because all the words in that verse only have one meaning. So this is called a muhkam verse. The muhkam verse is that which, according to the Arabic language, can only bear one meaning, or according to another definition, where the intended meaning is known with great clarity. So these 2 sayings are both definitions of the muhkam verse, and they are slightly different. They are slightly different. So some scholars said that verse which meaning is clear, absolutely clear, this is called a muhkam verse. Some scholars, they gave more details, and you could say that you could merge these 2 sayings together. Some scholars said, well, what that means is that they are so clear. Why is that? Because the words in them can only carry one meaning, hence the verse in general, holistically, it can only give one meaning. It could only have one meaning. So these 2 definitions come together. The majority of the verses in the Qur'an are muhkam verses. The majority. An example is what Allah Ta'ala revealed in verse 11 Surah Ash-Shura, Surah 42, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, which means nothing is like Allah in any way. It can't have more than this meaning. There is no other potential meaning. And also among the muhkam verses is Surah Al-Ikhlas, ayah number 4. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, and there is none similar to him, none similar to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Likewise, a third example now of a muhkam verse. You'll be able to make a clearer comparison between the 2 types of verses when you see the other type of verse, which we will mention soon. Another example of a muhkam verse is the saying of Allah in Surah Maryam, Surah 19, ayah 65. هل تعلم له سميا, هل تعلم له سميا, which means, do you know of a similar to Allah? The answer is no, there is no similar to Allah. So these verses, they only have one meaning in the Arabic language, and they are the foundations. They are the base of the Qur'an. So just up to here, by learning that, we would already have learned more than many people know about the Qur'an. That there are verses called muhkam verses. Many people who memorize the Qur'an, they don't know about this, and they've given their lives to memorizing the Qur'an, and they don't know this because they do not find the authentic religious knowledge. They don't find scholars to take the religious knowledge from, like we found as Shaykh Abdullah rahimahullah rahmatan wasi'ah. So this is one type of verse. A second type of verse is the mutashabih verse. The mutashabih verse is the verse that its linguistic meaning is not clear, or that it could possibly have numerous dimensions in meaning. And there is a need for contemplation to interpret it in accordance with the proper meaning. So it's a verse that's meaning it's not clear. And because of let's break it down. The verse itself has words in it. One or more of these words can have more than one meaning. So if it can have more than one meaning, this means that, okay, it's not clear which one is it. Okay, so in comparison to the first, it's not clear which meaning is it. So it requires us to think. It requires us to look at the verses that only have one meaning, so that we don't give these second types of verses a meaning that contradicts the first type of ayah. So an example of this is what Allah revealed in Surah Taha, Surah 20, Ayah 5. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala revealed Ar-Rahmanu ala al-Arsh istawa. So let's look at these words. Ar-Rahman, this refers to Allah. It's a name of Allah. Like we said, Bismillahir Rahman Ar-Rahim. Ar-Rahman, this is Allah. Ala al-Arsh, the word ala here literally would mean on. Then al-Arsh, it is that which Allah Ta'ala created, and it is great in size. Istawa, however, does not have one meaning. It doesn't only just have one meaning. It can have many different meanings. For example, Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi, he mentioned that it can have 15 meanings. Istawa. Among the meanings is to sit, and this is amongst the most apparent meanings. Amongst the meanings is to sit up straight, or to be straight. Among the meanings is to be well done when it comes to cooking, to be cooked well. Amongst the meanings is for example, water to yastawi, to become level with something. Among the meanings is control. Among the meanings is subjugation. So it's not one meaning. So this ayah, somebody could take it in more than one way. But there are certain meanings that if attributed to Allah, they go against other ayahs of the Qur'an. They go against other things that Muslims know. So for example, if someone said, well, istawa has 15 meanings, let me pick one. I'm going to pick that it means well cooked. Right? Then the verse, according to that person, would mean Ar-Rahman, Allah is well cooked over the Arsh. And that's obviously absurd. Why? Because Allah mentioned وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ. Allah doesn't have a similar. So Allah is not like the creation. Allah doesn't eat, and Allah is not eaten. It's obvious. Even saying it sounds like, well, that's so obvious, because the principle in the religion is that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has attributes of perfection, not of weakness. So we can't attribute being cooked to Allah. But istawa, one of its meanings is to be cooked. So if someone says, well, why can't we use that meaning? We say, isn't it obvious? You want to say that Allah is well cooked over the Arsh? That's madness. That's attributing weakness to Allah. That's like saying Allah doesn't deserve to be worshipped. That's like saying Allah is like food, that Allah gets hot, that Allah, a'udhu billah. So that meaning, that's out of the question. We can't use that one. So then, if a person says, well, you know what? I'll say that it means sit. Because that's linguistically, in the dictionaries, if you look at istawa, the verb, amongst its meanings is to sit. So if they say, well, let's see about this one. Can we say Allah sits over the Arsh? Well, again, no. Because sitting entails that he would be like the creation. People sit, certain types of insects sit, animals sit, everything that sits has a top side and a bottom side, a front side and a back side. So this is obviously not appropriate to be attributed to Allah. So we can't use that meaning either. So we've crossed one meaning off, which is to be well cooked. We've crossed a second meaning off, which is to be sitting. And also all of these other meanings that don't befit. We can't say Allah became level with the Arsh, because the agreement of all the scholars of Ahl Sunnah is that Allah exists without a place. So what does istawa mean? It can have, according to the language, all these different meanings. Okay, we've said this one is inappropriate, this one is inappropriate, this one is inappropriate. What's left? One of the meanings is that Allah has control over the Arsh. Is this permissible to attribute to Allah? Yes, of course. Allah does have control over the Arsh, just as He has control over all of creation. Likewise, Allah subjugates the Arsh. Allah has the Arsh under His control. This also is a meaning of the verb istawa. So to control, to subjugate, and so on. So the scholars said, well, these meanings, they don't go against anything else in the Qur'an. Allah mentioned, "Laysa kamithlihi shay." Allah is not like the creation. So can we say Allah has control over the Arsh? The answer is yes. Because controlling the Arsh is not an attribute of weakness. It doesn't denote, it doesn't necessitate that Allah is like the creation. We're not saying Allah is controlled or overcome. No. So this is the case of this second type of verse. You saw the first type of verse, it was easy. We said, "Laysa kamithlihi shay." We understood. It means Allah is nothing like the creation. We said, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ. According to the language, it only has one meaning. Easy. Then you come to the mutashabih verse. Here it's not as clear. According to the language, these words can have many different meanings. Many different meanings. And we've got to pick the appropriate one, such as, or so as not to belittle Allah or insult Allah. And the rule is not this. The rule is not that you take the most apparent meaning. Like, for example, look, the apparent meaning of istawa, we said, is to sit. In schools, in the classroom, you'll see the teacher saying, "Ya fulan," oh such and such, to the child. Istawi. Istawi meaning sit up. Okay, don't sit slouched. Istawi jalisa. You'll hear the imam saying, "Sawu sufufakum." Okay, line up properly. Istawu wa'tadilu. Okay, here it means be straight. It doesn't mean sit down. Okay, so it's context dependent. Here, when we're speaking about Allah Ta'ala, it doesn't befit Allah for us to say istawa means to be up straight, to say that Allah was straight above the Arsh, a'udhu billah, or that Allah sat above the Arsh. It depends on the context. So when we say to a child, "Ya fulan istawi jalisa," istawi, sit up straight. Here it means sit. I mean, we could say, what if someone said istawi to a child and said, "Well, I meant, be well cooked." That doesn't make sense. It is dependent upon the context. So you say to a child, istawi, and it means sit up. The Imam, when he turns around to the people that are going to follow him in prayer, and he says, istawu wa'tadilu, it means stand close together, stand in line. Be aligned in a way that the line is straight. So there it means something else. When it comes to using it about Allah, it cannot be used to mean things that denote that Allah would be like the creation. So we choose things that are appropriate to attribute to Allah. So this verse, it is a mutashabih verse. It requires clarity. And we only interpret it in a way that agrees with the first type of verse. So if someone says that Allah sits, this is wrong and kufr, because it goes against those verses that we mentioned in the beginning, meaning لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, Allah is not like the creation. If you interpret these verses to mean He sits, then you've gone against the foundations of the Qur'an. If you say that it means that He's well cooked over the Arsh, then this goes against the foundations of the Qur'an, and so on. So this is a mutashabih verse. Sometimes there are words in verses that can make it unclear what is the meaning. A matter that is not in creed, for example, ثلاثة قروء, when it's mentioned about a female who becomes divorced, her husband divorces her. Then if she is someone who menstruates, then she has to wait. She has to wait ثلاثة, three, ثلاثة قروء. قروء جمع القرء. So she has to wait for 3 qurus, if you will. So the scholars differed. Some of them said this means she's got to wait, like the Shafi'i said, she's got to wait for 3 times of purity. So when she's not on menses. The Hanafi said no, quru means the opposite. It means she has to wait for 3 menstruations before she can marry someone else. So this is not only in the matters of creed. So there, however, when the Shafi'i said it means this and the Hanafi said it means this, there is a valid difference of opinion. Because does that go against other verses of the Qur'an? No, it doesn't. So whether they say this or this, they are not going against other verses of the Qur'an. As for here, we can't say, oh, everybody's Muslim. So yeah, these people believe that Allah is sat on the Arsh. These people believe He's without a place. And these people believe that He is level with the Arsh and so on. We don't say, oh, it's a difference of opinion, so it's valid. No, because these go against core principles in the religion. They go against those verses. So the meaning has to be one that is appropriate, that is befitting to Allah, i.e. that He exists without a place. Another example of this type of verse is what Allah revealed in Surah Fatir. Surah Fatir, ayah number 10. وَإِلَيْهِ يَصْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُهُ. If someone looks at this verse and they take it literally, they would translate it, or they would give its meaning to be وَإِلَيْهِ, and to Allah, and to Allah يَصْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ. To Allah, the good words rise, ascend. If someone took this literally, they would say, and the Wahhabiyys do take this literally, they say, well, it means that the good words, they ascend to Allah, who is in the sky, hovering, they say, above the Arsh. وَإِلَيْهِ يَصْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُهُ. And the good deeds, they raise these words. They raise these words. This is what it would literally mean. But this is a mutashabih verse, because as soon as we say that, as soon as someone takes it literally, it clashes with the verses that we know that say Allah is not like the creation. So it must have a different meaning. It must have a different meaning. The actual meaning is the good words such as La ilaha illallah, they ascend, they go up, they rise to a place that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala made very, very, very high in status, very honorable. It doesn't mean that they rise to Allah. Like we say, Baytullah, the house of Allah. It means this is a special house. It has a very high rank. Likewise, if it is said, Ilayhi, literally, someone might say, to him these words go. It doesn't mean to him. It means to that place that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala made honorable, namely the sky. The sky is an honorable place. وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُهُ. This means that the good deed is raised by these good statements. Meaning a person is a believer, and because he says these good words, this is a good deed, and by that it rises to the sky. It is known to Allah. This meaning is in agreement with the muhkam verse, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. So in other words, you have a muhkam verse, and then you have a mutashabih verse. The mutashabih verse, which is unclear, it's not like the muhkam verse, very clear and direct. You cannot interpret the mutashabih verse to clear it up. You can't interpret it in a way that goes against the muhkam verses. And that's the whole topic. So, if you want clarity, and there are many meanings, potential meanings of this verse, you pick the meaning that befits Allah. You pick a meaning, if it's to do with the attributes of Allah, you pick a meaning that does not go against the other verses, those that are the core of the Qur'an. Thus, to understand the meaning of the mutashabih verses, it is necessary to refer them back to the muhkam verses. Again, to understand the meaning of the mutashabih verses, it is necessary to refer them, these verses, back to the muhkam verses. This is in reference to the mutashabih matters that are possible for scholars to know. For example, there is a hadith in which it mentions about Allah. The Prophet ﷺ used the word in a hadith Qudsi, yuharwil about Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So if you don't know what the word yuharwil means, and someone comes to you and says to you, look, in the hadith it says Allah jogs, a'udhu billah, because that's what yuharwil literally means. Someone comes to you and mentions to you a non-befitting attribute to Allah. They say Allah jogs, or Allah laughs, or Allah becomes angry, or Allah is in love with, or Allah Ta'ala is jealous, or is astonished. All of these are non-befitting. And they say, oh, but look, it's in the hadith. So you know then, because they've likened Allah to the creation, they've gone against core matters, like laysa kamithlihi shay. Allah is not like the creation. So what do you say? You say, look, the Prophet didn't say that. He didn't say run. He didn't say jog. He didn't say amaze. He didn't say astonished. So the person might say, look, yeah, but he said yuharwil. He said Ajiba. He said, Dahika. Dahika Allahu layla. He said these words. But he said, well, look, it doesn't mean that. He said, Dahika, it has a meaning that Allah knows what it means. But of course, it can't mean that he laughed, because that's part of the creation. Yuharwil, if al-harwala is attributed to Allah, it doesn't mean jog. You're saying it means jog. The Prophet never said jog. He said, no, but look, the Prophet said yuhar. Yeah, the Prophet said yuharwil. He didn't say J-O-G, jog. And like this, he said, Dahika Allahu layla. He didn't say Allah laughed that night. He said, Ajib Allahu layla. He didn't say Allah was astonished. You're making these words up. Allah didn't say Allah sits on the throne. He said, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-Arsh istawa. You're saying sit. I'm not taking my religion from your understanding. So whenever something like this is brought to you, where you know that it's an attribute of the creation that is attributed to Allah, what do? You say, no, this is wrong. Then if they bring the Arabic to you, you say, well, look, that's a different story now. That's written in Arabic. I believe whatever the Prophet ﷺ said, but I know that it doesn't mean what you're saying, because you're likening Allah to the creation. So this is how we go with the issue. We stick with the core, the foundation ayahs of the Qur'an that say Allah is nothing like us. Like, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ. Rarely there will be a Muslim that doesn't know this ayah. It means Allah is not like the creation. So we stick with that. Coincidentally, the scholars said about the attributes like ضحك الله الليلة means that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala eternally willed to give somebody something good. It means rahim Allah. It means Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala had mercy. It doesn't mean that Allah laughed, as Al-Bukhari explained. Likewise, in the same hadith, when it is mentioned, for example, Ajib Allahu layla, it doesn't mean Allah was surprised or Allah was astonished. It means mercy, as the scholars explained. And like this, this is how we go with it. We go back to the scholars. Or if we don't know what the scholars said, we just say, well, I don't know what it means. But I tell you what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean Allah is like the creation. So, thus to understand the meaning of the mutashabih verses, it is necessary to refer them back to the muhkam verses. This is in reference to the mutashabih matters that are possible for the scholars to know. We'll speak more about this. As for, according to the recitation of stopping of at the majestic name, i.e. pausing one's recitation at the word Allah, in what Allah revealed, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. This means no one knows its ta'wil except Allah. Then according to this recitation, the mutashabih refers to the matters such as the exact time of the occurrence of the Day of Judgment. Okay, we need to go back. So that verse that we were discussing from Surah 3, Al-Imran, a part of it says, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. There are two ways to recite this verse. You can either say, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ. So you can continue, you can say the name of Allah and continue, or you can stop. So if you say the name of Allah and continue, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ. They call this qira'atul wasl, literally the connected qira'ah. You continue reading. As for if you say وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ afterwards, and you pause, they call this qira'atul waqf. So if you stop on it, it means one thing. If you don't stop on it, it means another thing. So let me explain. This verse literally means that nobody knows the meaning of certain types of verses except Allah. This is if you stop on this verse, if you stop on the name of Allah. وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ. This ayah here, it means that only Allah knows certain matters. And we're going to discuss what these matters are. But if you don't read it like that, and it's fine if you read it like that, if you don't read it like that and you read it instead, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ, it means there are other matters that both Allah and the creation, part of the creation, the scholars know. This is all we're going to say about this verse now. And we're going to come back to it later, because you will see how the people who liken Allah to the creation try to use this verse as a proof for what they say. And we will discuss, we'll mention, we'll review what the scholars said about this verse and how it refutes what they say. So all you need to know for now is that there is قراءة الوقف على لفظ الجلالة وقراءة الوصل. There's a way that you can read this verse and stop at the name of Allah. You say وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ, that only Allah knows its ta'wil. Or there is the other recitation where you continue, in which case it would mean no one knows the meanings of these matters except Allah and some of the scholars. We'll discuss that inshallah in the near future. It was narrated from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he said, اعملوا بمحكمه وآمنوا بمتشابهه. This means apply the muhkam verses, use them as a base, use the muhkam verses as a foundation. وآمنوا, and believe, بمتشابهه, in the mutashabih verses, meaning believe that Allah revealed them. And either you can say, look, I believe Allah revealed it, it's an attribute of Allah, and I'm not going to go into it. But I'll tell you something, it's not like the creation. So just, I don't know how to explain it. I just believe that it was revealed, because I believe in the Qur'an, and it was revealed as part of the Qur'an. I believe in it, and let's just stop there. Or you can say, well, it means such and such, and give it a befitting meaning. A scholar says that, so you would follow a scholar in that. But what it doesn't mean is that Allah is like the creation. It does not mean that. Now, before we start, to mention the saying of Abu Nasr al-Qushayri, it's important to give this some context. You see, much of what we say against the Wahhabiyys and what they say against us, it boils down to this issue here. That when it comes to verses, now we spoke about muhkam verses and mutashabih verses. When it comes to the verses in which the attributes of Allah are mentioned, and is that absolutely every verse in the Qur'an? The answer is no. For example, it mentioned in the Qur'an that Allah is Al-Aziz or Al-Hakim, okay? Qadir or Al-Muqtadir or Wahid. These are attributes of Allah. But is that in every single verse? The answer is no. So the verses in which the attributes of Allah are mentioned, the anthropomorphists, like the Wahhabiyys, who give Allah human attributes, they say, well, these attributes of Allah that are mentioned in the Qur'an, you have to take them literally. Meaning, if it's a word that can have many meanings, you've got to take the most apparent meaning. No matter what it is, you've got to take the most apparent meaning. They don't say that in all the Qur'an. They only say that about the verses that pertain to the attributes of Allah. Now, where did they get this rule from? Allah knows best. It's not a rule that was explained by the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. It's something that goes against the intellect, because a person would have to attribute non-befitting things to Allah. So this is where the difference of opinion is. They look at these verses and they say, no, you've got to take it literally. You've got to take it literally. Because, I mean, the way they think that they make sense of it is that they say, look, if you don't take it literally, then you're not believing in what the Prophet conveyed. They say, well, you're not actually believing in the Qur'an. If you're saying, oh, it doesn't mean, it says this, but it doesn't mean that, then you're not actually believing in what the Prophet said. Now, on the other hand, what you're doing is what? You're saying, no, this taking its literal meaning is non-befitting to Allah. So we take a non-literal meaning. We take one of its meanings, yeah, it's one of the meanings of the word, but it's not apparent. We use one of those meanings. Otherwise, you end up going against the intellect and saying that Allah runs and He jogs and He laughs and so on, and that He has a foot, and that He has two right hands, and that He has a big face and many eyes, and He has so on and so on. This is what ends up happening if you use these verses and the hadith also. So it's wider than that. You say to this Wahhabi that if you do that, then it means you'd be attributing all these attributes of humans to Allah. And Allah mentioned in the Qur'an, "Laysa kamithlihi shay." So they're in this like realm of, look, you've got to take it literally. If you don't take it literally, if you don't take the first meaning that comes to your mind, the most apparent meaning, you are belying the Qur'an. And then, so they're very narrow-minded. Then you say to them, well, look, Allah said, "Laysa kamithlihi shay." Allah is not like the creation. Then they dig a deeper hole for themselves and say, yeah. Allah laughs, and Allah Ta'ala, He comes down and He sits, but not like the creation. So they add this dimension, which already what they're saying is absurd. They're saying He has a hand and He has hands, and He comes down and He sits on the Arsh. And then we say to them, but look, Allah mentioned Laysa kamithlihi shay. They say, yeah, we know. His supposed hands and His sitting, it's not like ours. Which it makes them sound even more insane. But this is what they believe. They say, well, this is our faith. This is the test. Like to say that, as though they're saying that Allah reveals something that sounds so absurd and it sounds so much against the intellect, but there's the test. Are you going to believe in it or not? So once a person, subhanallah, has this in his heart, and it's a very sinister way of thinking, where you don't use logic, you don't use the intellect, and you're stuck in this particular way. It's very hard to come out of it. It's very hard to see straight after that, because you're already going around in circles, and you're making excuses here, and you're adding, and you're telling yourself that it's okay that Allah Ta'ala supposedly sits, but it's not like we sit. And I'm still believing in the Qur'an. I'm saying it's not like the creation, but I've got to take. So this person becomes very confused. That's why it's very hard to pull one of these people back, to make them see sense, because now their mind, it's programmed in a certain way. And because it's a creedal issue, because it's something that they take as a belief, it's very hard to unravel. It's a knot that's very hard to untie. So they take them literally. What do Ahl Sunnah do? What do the Muslims do? The Muslims say these verses, we don't take them literally. We can't, because it makes the Qur'an, verses of the Qur'an clash with other verses. And it makes us Muslims look, if you do that, it makes the Muslims, if the non-Muslims see you as Muslims, then it makes the religion of Islam seem to them like a laughing stock. Like as though they're saying, how silly is this? They say this and they say this. And the Wahhabiyys, they are the ones who have a lot of money, and they promote the religion a lot. And when it comes down to creedal issues, the non-Muslims see that these people are defective, especially atheists. Atheists who don't believe, who are not Christians, so they don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God. So they try to use logic and things, and then sometimes they look at these issues, even though you would find maybe some of them that don't even believe in God, but they'll say, well, look, what you're saying doesn't even make sense. You're saying he's like the creation, and you're saying he's not. Like, are you all right? So Ahl Sunnah, they said, Allah is not like the creation. These attributes, we don't take their apparent meanings and apply them to Allah. We don't read the Qur'an a literal reading. We are not literalists. We do as Allah instructed in the Qur'an. We use our minds. Yes, the Qur'an, first and foremost, we use it. If Allah mentioned an attribute of His in the Qur'an, we believe in it. But we believe it's not like the attributes of the creation at all. It's a word that Allah attributed to His That, to His self. It's an attribute. If the scholars, they want to understand and give it a meaning in that context, then so be it. We will follow them in that, as long as they abide by the rules, which is that they don't liken Allah to the creation. And you see thousands of scholars, they did that. They interpreted those verses, those words that contain literal, that if taken literally, they would be inappropriate to be attributed to Allah. They took these words and they gave them a correct meaning. I mean, they didn't just make a meaning up. These meanings exist in the language, in the Arabic language. And we call this, it's a key word, we call this at-ta'wil. To look at a verse in which an attribute of Allah is mentioned, and then not to take the literal meaning, but to take an underlying meaning, what they sometimes refer to as an allegorical meaning. It's not on the surface, it's below. This is called at-ta'wil, to make a non-literal interpretation. And the Wahhabiyyas say at-ta'wil huwa ta'til. They say to interpret and not take it literally, this is kufr. So they call us kuffar, ironically. They call us kuffar. They say you are non-Muslims because you do not believe. And this was the creed of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab al-Najdi. And before him it was the creed of Abu al-Abbas, Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah al-Harrani, and his students, Ibn Kathir, and likewise Ibn Qayyim. And before them it was the belief of Al-Karramiyya. Muhammad ibn Karram was a student of Al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And then he became somebody who started to bring about what was in his heart of the creed of these people that liken Allah to the creation. It is said that some 30,000 people followed Muhammad ibn Karram. Some of the biographers mention that Muhammad ibn Karram, he would sit in the gatherings of Al-Imam Ahmad. And Al-Imam Ahmad was very strict. He wouldn't he wouldn't speak about the attributes of Allah. He would not usually interpret. He would just say, Allah revealed it. أَمِرُّوهُ كَمَا جَاءَ. We believe in the word that was revealed, and we say Allah knows best. So Muhammad ibn Karram was one of his students, and he used to sit in his gatherings and the gatherings of the other scholars. Then later on, he brought out what was really inside his heart. And they said all sorts of things about Allah. And they are among the first people who attributed themselves to al-Islam, but in actual fact, they were likening Allah to the creation. So this is a summary of the matter. The Wahhabiyya are people who liken Allah to the creation. And they say if you don't take this word that is attributed to Allah in the Qur'an or the different hadiths literally, if you don't take the most apparent meaning, then you do not believe in the hadith. You don't believe in the Prophet, فَأَنْتَ كَافِرٌ. And you don't believe in what Allah revealed. You don't believe in the book, فَأَنْتَ كَافِرٌ. So you are a kafir. And they say, well, what you're doing is you Ash'aris and you Maturidis, you are not taking the literal meaning and you're giving it another meaning that you are, making up. When in actual fact, the scholars are taking it from that word. They're saying you're giving it another meaning, and this is ta'wil. You're giving it a non-literal interpretation. And they say, what ta'wilu ta'til? And giving it a non-literal interpretation is kufr. So this is insha'Allah what we're going to talk about next week when we mention the saying of Abu Nasr al-Qushayri. And inshallah we will also speak a little bit about al-Imam al-Hafiz Muhammad Murtada al-Zabidi. We'll remind you about him and al-Ghazali also insha'Allah ta'ala. But Nasir, those names still ring a bell, don't they? Muhammad Murtada al-Zabidi. Yeah? What was his book called? Do you remember? That was the book that he explained. So Al-Ghazali, remember Al-Ghazali? He had a book called Ihya Ulumuddin, and then Muhammad Murtada al-Zabidi explained it. What was his explanation called? Al-Risala? No. But points for remembering Al-Risala. Ithaf. As-Sada. What does that mean? Ithaf as-Sadat al-Muttaqeen. Yes. Ithaf as-Sadat al-Muttaqeen. Khair inshallah. We'll go through it next time. Let's stop here then, inshallah. Let's say La ilaha illallah and as-salah ala nabi. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم